The best debt payoff strategy most people ignore. What do you think? Do you think I'm crazy? I don't think I'm crazy, but I've been teaching debt payoff on YouTube for about 3 years or so. And it's been very hard to get people in my real life to just kind of take action, right? And I know I'm not the only one because I remember I saw this comment 3 days ago. I taught this method to 3 people, and none of them tried it, despite the fact I showed them detail how I paid off my own debts and how it would help their specific situations. It's frustrating, but I did my part, right? And so, folks, what you're looking at here is probably the most valuable debt payoff demonstration that you will ever see. And that's why I have people who I've never met leaving comments about how they paid off so much debt. In fact, I've had emails where it's like, dude, I paid off all my debt. I'm like, yeah, now you know how it feels to have rich people problems, right? You'll get there one day, hopefully. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna pay off debt today, which is something that a lot of people don't get to experience. In fact, if you just look up TikTok right now, what do you see? It's probably some young person who went to college and then maybe even has a job and is struggling with debt, right? I think they call it debt talk. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. We're going to pay off our debt using something we called the velocity method. And we used to call it something else, which had a cooler name, but the state government of Illinois didn't like that. So we're going to call it the velocity method. All right. And so what is this method? Well, it's simply not saving money, but even in a better way. It's called Not Saving Money 2.0, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But the first step to paying off debt is creating a budget, because your budget is your debt attack plan. You have your income, your expenses, your leftover checking and savings. Now, this person is doing better than the average American, because the average American can't even come up with $400 in an emergency, right? And so what we're going to do here is show that when we pay off debt, it's actually easy to get that money in the form of something called a line of credit. Okay. And so once we create our budget, make sure that you create an expense breakdown and list every single debt that you have as its own line item. And then here on the last line item, we just combine all of our personal expenses not tied to debt. So food, gas, insurance. So imagine that you were debt free. What would be the number you would still have to pay every single month in order for you to live, right? So that's what this line item is for. And we don't have to be exact with that, but we do have to be exact with the debts and the associated payments with the debt. Okay. And so what we're going to do is, with this velocity method, assume we have the same income, same expenses, because that's kind of like the whole point, to show, hey, when we just have the same income but just change the flow of money, can we get a more favorable result? And right, and I'm going to tell you how we change the flow of money is we put a big fat zero in this checking and savings. Okay, we don't save money, right? So in the average American banking scenario, we kind of think as the checking account as the final destination of our money, whereas with the velocity method, it's actually not the checking account, which is why it's zero. It's going to be something called a line of credit. And what's a line of credit? Well, it's a financial tool where you could borrow money, pay it back, and then use it over and over again, right? So there's two main types of lines of credit that you may want to use in this scenario, which is a personal line of credit or a home equity line of credit, okay? Personal or home equity. Now, a credit card is technically a line of credit, but we're not going to use that as what we call our main operating account. Now, why is that? Is because if we put all of our money into a credit card, we're going to have some friction in how our money flows from and how we can pay our bills, right? So if I put the $6,000 into one credit card, can I use this one credit card to pay the other credit cards and the other loans? No, it's really hard, right? But when we put this $6,000 into a line of credit, we can get the money immediately out if we wish, right? So we want that ultimate flexibility. And not only that, the home equity line of credit usually has lower interest rates than credit cards, right? Like usually you get like I don't know, 8 to 18%, and it's very unusual to get 18%, but those are the interest rate ranges usually. And then with the credit card, it's not unusual to see like 20 to 30%. Okay, so this is what we're gonna do. We have these 3 credit cards, right? So this is gonna be we're going to move them into a line of credit, but I'm going to show you how we determine which debts to move into a line of credit. Okay. So if you've never heard of the cash flow index, right, all it is a basic formula of the balance of the debt divided by the monthly payment. So the balance of the debt is $5,000, and then you divide it by the monthly payment. And then what we have here, okay, is the cash flow index. Okay. So basically think of this as a ranking system, and that's what we're gonna do when we do the formula: balance of the debt divided by monthly payment. And so you kind of think of this as a ranking or sorting system. So the lower the number, the more bang you get for your buck in terms of cash flow, right? Whereas this highest number, what does this mean? Well, basically it means that we have to pay a lot of money. In this case, it'll be $265,000 for an itty bitty amount of payment, right? Big chunk of money for a small payment. Okay. And that means that we're not really getting that much in terms of cash flow when we pay off the mortgage, which is why we pay it off last, right? So anything below 50 is pretty much fair game. So let's go ahead and count this up. So 5, 18, 5, 8, 15. And then how much credit card debt is that? It's 28 grand, right? 28 grand. And then let's move it into a line of credit. But before we do the final step, let me just show you one thing and then address the elephant in the room. So what's the one thing I want to show? Well, simply by transferring the debt, guess what happens here? We go from $1,000 to $2,000 of cash flow without making more money. See, I want you to stare at this, okay? I am using basic Excel, A plus B, A minus B math, right? I can't fool you with this. You can reproduce this, okay? All I did was just shift some debt, and and just because I decided I wouldn't save money, this 1,000 turned to 2,000, right? We're dumping everything into line of credit. Now, elephant in the room, will the bank give you a free and clear line of credit when you have a lot of debt and you don't have that much left over? The answer to that is no. Why? Because banks don't lend money to people who need it. According to the bank, you are a bad person if you need money, right? You are a bad person if you need money. And why is that? Because people who need money don't pay you back, right? So we have to learn how to do things in the right order and not react, but plan and prepare, right? And this is why if you want to get credit, you always have to get it when you don't need the money. You know, I had someone ask me like a while back, calling live on you know, when I had a live call-in show in the YouTube 99 cent members live stream, and he was like, hey, yeah, like you know, I'd like to get a personal line of credit, and I just said, do you need money today? And he was like, no. And I said, that's the perfect time to get it, because when the bank sees you don't need money, you're likely to pay them back. Okay. That's how they think. Now, you might be wondering, well, if this is so unrealistic to get a line of credit when you need money, why do I demonstrate it? Believe it or not, it's actually easier to understand the importance of the line of credit, even though you won't get one at the stage, right? Like you literally saw me turn 1,000 to $2,000 in an instant. And also, if you ever look at real life case scenarios that I get like in my email unsolicited, you'll see that most people, if they have a line of credit, it's just someone like, oh, they start out with like a maxed out credit card essentially, right? And so we have to essentially work so much harder, and the situation becomes so much complicated to determine when the debt payoff happens. We do it, you know, I know how to do most of these scenarios in like 20 minutes if they're simple. And then this actually took me 1 hour and 30. But my point is this, right? Now you understand the importance of a line of credit. And oh my goodness, I wish I would have known this method before I even got into debt, right? And remember, banks don't lend money to people who need it, because people who need money, according to the bank, are bad people. All right. So now let's go to the next step, which is we're going to not save money. We're going to put our entire paycheck into the line of credit, take our expenses out, right, of the line of credit. Because remember, whatever we put in, we can immediately pull out as long as it's below the credit limit, right? As long as you have an available balance, it's all game. You don't have to wait. You know, like a credit card, sometimes you make a big payment and then you have to wait like a couple of days for the rest of the balance to be available. In a line of credit, it's immediately available. Immediately. Okay. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna put our entire paycheck into the line, take our expenses out, and then rinse and repeat over and over again. And to represent this with Excel, it's previous month's balance, interest, minus whatever our current cash flow is, which is $2,007. And then to calculate the 8% interest for using the line of credit, we take the average daily balance, multiply it by the interest rate, and then divide by 12. And then I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste. And then you see when you copy and paste, bam. All right. month 15. Month 15. We paid it off. All right. So that's 15 months. All right. And that's going to be 5 plus 8. Well, actually 15 months. And how much was that? That was 28K. That was 28K. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and do this. And then now we have to figure out the balance of these loans at 15 months. Now, I know for some of you, you freak out about the loans because you don't know what's what. Schedules are long and confusing, but don't worry. We got this loan calculator right here where all I got to do is type 15, right, in the current month. And then we see that these are the current balances of the loan. And then we see that this has the highest interest rate. It has the lowest cash flow index, although it's not as low as I want it to be. So I'm going to start off with this one first. So 17 grand, I'm going to get $415 back of cash flow. And so let's go ahead and do that. All right. And then I'm just going to go ahead and do this. And this is going to be plus 17003.37. All right. And then this is going to be 0 right here. Okay. And then $2,422.34 of cash flow. And I'm going to do this right here. So it's going to be minus 2422.34. And then I am going to copy and paste. And then we see bam, bam, bam. In month 22, right? Month 22, we had it paid off. Okay. So 22 months. And then that's going to be 28 plus 22. So that's going to be 50K. All right, and now we got to these two, so that's gonna be, so this is gonna now be 0, and this is gonna be 22. Look at this, I'm just like acting casual. Oh, my auto loan was paid off in 7 months, and like no big deal. All right, so now, no, excuse me. Now we got this other auto loan right here, okay, and then I'm gonna copy and paste, and then this is gonna be plus 16407.34, right? And we see that right here, where the cash flow index is very low. That's what we like to see and to pay off the loan. It's gonna be 0. All right, so now let's go back here, and I'm just gonna do this. Minus 2882.75, and then I'm gonna copy and paste here, and then we'll see that in 28 months, bam, it was paid off. All right, you know, you paid another car off in 6 months. All right, no more of that struggle bus, folks. So that'll be 75K. 70. Why did I didn't even do the math correctly in Excel? But all right, 75K. So now the final one is that 30-year mortgage. 30-year mortgage. Okay, 30-year mortgage. So with the 30-year mortgage, we have to be careful, right? Why is that? What does this high cash flow index number mean? If we move the loan into a line of credit, it means we get lots of balance, little bit of payment, right? Lots of balance, little bit of payment. So when we move this 30-year mortgage from a 3 to an 8, we're actually going to end up paying a lot more interest than we have to. So we don't want to do that, right? So does that mean that we can't use a line of credit? No, it doesn't, because we can still pay it off in chunks, right? So understand that putting your entire loan into a line of credit is a completely different thing than paying it off in pieces. In fact, one of the most important things that you'll learn from this experience is that the debt payoff order is pretty much the most important thing when it comes to all of this, right? And when you use a line of credit, whether it's a 1 or 8%, the effect of the interest rate is pretty negligible. It doesn't mean it doesn't matter at all, but what I'm saying is that most people will look at you like you're nuts for using an 8% line of credit for a 3% loan. Now, why would you not just do a direct extra payment? And the way that I would see the direct extra payments into a loan is that it's the default option that everybody knows they can do, but they never do, right? And so if everybody knows they can overpay a loan, heck, everybody knows they can overpay a credit card and they charge 23% interest rates. So why does nobody overpay credit cards? It's because when you pay or overpay a loan or a credit card, there's an element of friction that makes it hard for you to take out your money when you need it, right? Whereas with the line of credit, that element of friction doesn't exist. Okay. Now, given that this is your final loan, right? It's not really that big a problem if you do extra payments. What I'm saying is that, hey, if you got all the way to this point, just dumping all your money into one place, taking your expenses out, and then just rinse and repeat and somehow paying off your debt, and you want to do this with the 30-year mortgage, we certainly can. In fact, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to show you something. You take a piece of the loan. We're going to take a small piece of the loan. I'll say $6,000. Move it into the line of credit, 6000. All right. Guess what happens? Oh, that 6,000 got paid off in like 2 months, 2 or 3 months. Okay. Bam. See? So we're just essentially making a good amount of extra payments, moving the balance of the loan into the line of credit over and over again, and then just rinse and repeat. And we have a calculator for that to kind of determine what the payoff would be. And then I just think I put all the information in. Yeah, 251,827.78. And then you guys see that it gets paid off in 6 years. All right, 6 years, mortgage free. Now let's take a look at this, right? So like I said before, some people freak out about this 8%. And what I'm saying is that this 8%, when you're doing small amounts over and over again, is completely different from replacing your mortgage. Because look at this, 8%, 32 grand. What if we got access to a 1% line of credit? You see how it almost made no difference? I want to say, completely didn't make a difference. I'm just saying it barely made a difference, right? Some people think like the difference between a 1 and an 8% interest is like a completely different outcome, which may be true if you're replacing the loan. Loan replacement is a completely different game than paying it off in incremental amounts, because if I replace this 4% loan with the 1% line of credit, you'll see that it's 7 grand. Okay. However, even if I do 8%, you'll see that, wow, I end up paying a lot more for replacing this 4% loan with the 8% line of credit. So something that this is a little nuance we have to be careful about. We have to be careful about this, okay? But if I do small chunks over and over again, you see that you don't pay that much anymore. Okay. All right. Well, that's it for today, folks. This is Crayon Mentorship. And yeah, I mean, what do y'all think? You think most people would ignore this? I've been teaching this for 3 years, and maybe it's because I don't run ads and I just try to get like organic traffic. Maybe that might be one reason why. But maybe I need to start running ads, like join the debt-free cult. I can't even pronounce words today. Join the debt-free cult, right? Society has failed you. The education system didn't teach you anything about money, yet it's important for survival, right? Yeah, that's right. So that's why, because society has failed you, you have no choice but to join my debt-free cult. Anyways. All right. Well, that's it for today, folks. Have a great day, and I'll see you on the next video.